Welcome to the 6 Feet for Wellbeing Show with Health Promotion Services.
I'm Zarah.
And I'm Christine. Today on this show, we will be discussing substances and use on college campuses.
Awesome! Drug use is not as common in college campuses as the media portrays. However, as health educators, we want to make sure that students are aware of the risks and how to get help.
Absolutely. That's right, Zarah. So let's start with some education. Let's pop up on the screen that drug facts graphic.
Yes. Wow. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Can you show us what all of these different sections are, Christine?
Absolutely. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of sort of different rings here. So the innermost ring has a different substance classification type. So that's the depressants, the opioids, blah, blah, blah. So many of us are aware that alcohol is considered a depressant, right? Like that's a common education piece that I think most people sort of know, but it can be hard to understand what that actually means, like symptomatically, or sort of what's kind of occurring in the body. So on the graphic here, it shows the classification types, and then it shows sort of the effects of each class in the next sort of circle. And then this graphic goes even further, not the one we're displaying, will actually kind of demonstrate types and examples of that as well. So alcohol is an example of a depressant, and that sort of effect part of the circle is kind of some similar things that someone might sort of feel when consuming alcohol.
Gotcha. So for instance, with alcohol, the term depressant makes me think of something slow moving or even something like sadness, but much more is included in that.
Yeah.
Depressants can also affect things like your confidence, vomiting, nausea. These are a lot of things these are not really things you normally associate with the term depressant, right?
Exactly, right. But they can commonly occur.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. And also it is worth noting that there are obviously some positive effects of substances. Just like confidence is an example for alcohol. Well, the problem is that the positive effects are temporary. So there is, if someone sort of continues to drink and maybe gets more drunk, the drunker someone gets, the more the positive effects kind of go away.
That's really interesting. So you're saying that there's a sweet spot, right? That where you can find a balance of keeping the positive effects from a substance like alcohol without really descending into those negative effects that you might get when you have too much alcohol.
Yes, totally. So that right there is what you call the sweet spot. That is called the point of diminishing returns. So that is essentially where the positive effects are maximized right before sort of the negative impacts again. So if you go over this point of diminishing returns, then you're more likely to hit some of the negatives of sort of the effects.
Yeah, so really too much is not okay.
Yeah.
Which for a lot of things in life, right?
Yes.
And this is really directly opposed to what many people think of as like the college alcohol experience, right? Where the more someone drinks, the more fun they'll have.
Right.
But you're saying is that the point of diminishing returns is where you're feeling good, but you aren't overusing the substance to the point where some negative effects start.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's perfectly said. So kind of based on that too, so the point of diminishing returns, like obviously to reduce all risk of negative effects, that's not drinking at all, but that kind of zone is keeping the positives and diminishing the negatives. So that's perfect. So kind of looking at some of the other drug categories besides depressant, what else are we kind of seeing, Zarah?
Well, I also see on here you have stimulants, opioids, psychedelics, cannabinoids, dissociatives, and pathogens. Wow, those are really big words.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Can you describe what these different classifications mean, Christine?
Yes. So normally I think when we think of drugs, we normally just kind of think of depressants and stimulants. But there's a lot of different types as you are kind of examining here. So stimulants are the substances that sort of speed up the body system. So that includes things like caffeine, nicotine, cocaine, amphetamines. Psychedelics are those substances that produce changes in perception, mood, and cognitive processes. So examples, ayahuasca, LSD, or psilocybin. Zarah, do you feel like explaining some the cannabinoids?
Sure, Christine. Well, we often equate the terms cannabis and weed, but it's actually a lot more complex than that. Cannabinoids are substances that bind to special receptors of the body and the brain that have similar effects to those produced by the cannabis sativa plant. So examples include cannabis, which sometimes we also call weed,
Mhm.
synthetic cannabis, butane hash oil.
Yes, absolutely. And then another one of those categories are dissociative. So those are interesting because they cause distorted sensory perceptions and also can produce feelings of disconnection or detachment from the environment and or your concept of self.
Right.
So examples include ketamine, nitrous oxide, and those are two of like the main ones. So empathogens are another super interesting substance. So these increase an individual's feeling of empathy and benevolence towards others and increase feelings of being socially accepted and connected to others. But of course, like every sort of substance, they all kind of have their downsides. So empathogens also can cause mood swings, dehydration, and depression amongst other sort of symptoms for users. Examples of empathogens includes MDMA, methadone, and also ethylene.
Wow. At first, it sounded like those were positive things, and when you think about empathogens, you think, "Wow, that sounds like a good thing I want to have." But really, it's not, because when you look at the other
side,
it's not okay at all,
Yeah.
right? So now that we know the classifications of substances, their effects, and examples of each of those, how does this all really kind of work? How does the body absorb these substances, and how do we process and get rid of them, really?
Yes, absolutely. So this obviously is a super in-depth topic, but kind of to break it down in the quickest sort of version is that so we consume the drug by inhalation, putting it intravenously, consuming it kind of orally as well. So it gets into our system one of those sort of ways. And then the drugs are moving through the circulatory system, exiting our veins and our arteries and kind of entering into the tissues. But then also it's making its way to the brain. So going through that blood-brain barrier to actually get to the receptors in the brain and also the receptors throughout the body. So the drug attaches to the receptors, and this receptor is for other kind of hormones and enzymes and things like that. But these kind of fit perfectly in that lock and key mechanism. So the drugs also mimic other things that our body produces. So it kind of takes over that receptor.
Right.
And then they do their signaling and produce the effects that we just kind of saw on that kind of graphic. So then they detach themselves when they're done doing their thing. And then they mostly leave through the kidneys or intestine at kind of varying rates. So urine or feces are kind of the main ways in which they are ejected from the body.
Right. They're kind of sneaky going into your system, right? Figuring out ways to cross barriers that might, in other instances, protect you.
Right.
So, wow, these drugs we really covered a lot today. And so a lot of different types of substances. And sometimes there are positive effects, like you've heard, and sometimes there are negative effects.
Yep.
And of course, some substances have high potential for addiction. And so why do people use substances if the positive effects are just one part of the drug experience?
Right, absolutely. So I think it's good to point out that obviously no one would use substances if there were nothing positive involved with them. So that's obviously part of it.
Just like with anything.
Right, exactly. But with anything, absolutely. And then people wouldn't continue to use if those didn't exist. Or people would, if those negative effects didn't exist, people might decide to sort of use substances all the time. But we kind of learned that health-wise, that's not great for a lot of different reasons. So the main kind of reasons that we see in science why people use sort of those motivations for use is curiosity. So someone might just be sort of curious about how it feels, right? They also might just want to feel good for a while. So they actually like how the high or sort of being under the influence feels. Also could be to perform better. Now that could be academically, that could be athletically, a lot of different ways there. To feel better as well. So to kind of cope. Or to kind of change how we're feeling is another big one as well. And trying to fit in sort of that peer pressure aspect as well. So those are kind of the main motivations we see, not the whole list, but definitely some.
And I feel like often those reasonings are what we see in college students, in the college environments. And college environments can sometimes be places that make substances more available and they provide easier access to these substances. And other factors that impact the misuse or use of substances are the ease of drug availability. So if it's there, you have access to it, you're more likely to use it, and if you have it available to your friends. And their exposure to drug experimentation, the amount of peer pressure in social situation, those are things that college students experience.
Yes, definitely. So what we're seeing, so one kind of example based on what you just said, talking about sort of the college environment, is also the prevalence. It's not as prevalent, but also it's the normalization of binge drinking on college campuses. So binge drinking is classified as sort of 4 to 5 standard drinks within a 2-hour period. That's kind of what binge drinking is classified as. Often mixed drinks will contain more than one standard drink. So we're also, that definitely plays into it too. We don't always measure. It's hard to sort of eyeball. So it can be easy to kind of misjudge how much you're consuming, and also just kind of the over-consumption rates at certain parties and the games and things. Binge drinking can occur pretty easily if you're not sort of monitoring your own use.
Right.
That is about like 28% of UCSD students had 5 or more drinks the last time they partied or socialized. So around 30%, but 70% do not binge drink. So we have to also bust that perception as well.
Yeah. You would think it's a bigger number for students because just what you see in the media, what we hear, stories from our friends. Of course, they're talking more about their, fun experiences, and that sometimes involves like binge drinking. But we're not bragging about, oh, I didn't drink alcohol.
Right.
We don't brag about those.
I slept 8 hours. No one talks about that positive.
We don't talk about the good stuff. We don't brag about the good, healthy things that we do.
I know.
And this really means that over a quarter of students were binge drinking the last time they partied and socialized. So it's not as bad as what the media and what maybe society kind of portrays it.
Yeah.
And binge drinking is really associated with increased risks of injuries and illness. So reducing the amount of binge drinking that you do and your friends do help effectively our college community be stronger. And of course, you be stronger too.
Yes, likewise, absolutely. Yeah. So I think another thing, so based on what you just said, I think that's a really great point. So Health Promotion Services does utilize a harm reduction model. So what basically that means is if people choose to use and they want to use, they're going to use, there is a way to do that with less risk. So like binge drinking. So while reducing high risk behaviors is important, we also realize that all of us have different levels of risk for different behaviors in our lives. So harm reduction is really all about reducing that risk for ourselves and also the impact that it has on others.
Right. And we want to make sure that we talk about that and that you have some of those resources available to you.
Yes.
We also know that some people misuse and abuse or become addicted to certain substances.
Yeah.
And according to the harmreduction.org, substance misuse is the use of substances for a purpose that's not consistent with the legal or medical guidelines of that substance. For example, not using prescriptions in the intended way, using illegal substances, not using over-the-counter products in the intended way, etc.
Right, absolutely. And then substance abuse, so different than misuse, but in kind of the same vein, is the use of any substance that impairs your abilities to function or think, and also includes that substance use sort of interferes with the daily life. So each substance has a different level of what is considered heavy use, and what dependence may look like varies on the substance and also for the person as well. So for instance, heavy use according to dietary guidelines for alcohol is considered 8 or more drinks per week for females, 15 or more drinks per week for males. However, at levels way below that number, people can experience use-related problems and level of dependence. So if you are experiencing negative side effects for maybe even 2 drinks a week or 2 drinks a night, that could be something that is more of abuse because we're doing something in a way that is harmful to us and kind of others. So it's a scale.
You don't necessarily have to meet those 15 drinks.
Exactly, for it to be abuse.
Right. Because we all have different tolerance levels.
Yes.
And our bodies react to different substances differently.
Yeah.
And other warning signs that you and your friend may experience are when you're doing heavy use of substances or substance abuse are failed attempts to stop using that substance, which may be a sign of dependence.
Yeah.
You really can't function without it.
Yeah.
And also a pattern of using more of that substance than intended.
Yes. So definitely some signs to kind of look out for your own use and for others. So we also recognize too that harm reduction does not work for everyone. Some can't really find that balance of reducing the negative side effects for yourself. Sometimes it is 0 to 100. And that's all the kind of the scale that people have.
Right.
So in that case, abstinence may be the only sort of option for that person to live a healthful life, to sort of just exclude substances entirely. And that is okay. That is doable. That is normal. That is accepted.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we have those sort of resources on campus as well. So we do take a harm reduction approach to health promotion services, but we also are very abstinent friendly. And we are creating an environment through the Collegiate Recovery Program to help build community support, and really building a life outside of substances and also just outside of sobriety. It's not just about not using. So if you're interested in evaluating your substance use or would like more information about substance use in general, feel free to reach out to me, Christine Glissman. So I'm the Collegiate Recovery Coordinator as well as the health educator focusing on alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. You can email our main line at hps@ucsd.edu and someone will be in contact with you shortly. So other sort of resources as well. We have Basics and K6, which is a brief alcohol intervention screening for college students, either related to alcohol or cannabis. So this is a 2-session individual session with myself or some of the other health educators to really dive in and talk about your use, maybe some goals that you have. So that's a really nice way to kind of take a dive. We also have health coaching, which encompasses all kinds of health related things if you're wanting to change or set goals. So those are some really good resources. And obviously the Collegiate Recovery Program as well that we have. Looks a little different now because of COVID. We're all virtual, but it will be very blossoming. Do more things in person. I can't wait for that. But we also have the Collegiate Recovery Program as well. You can email that same email to find out more, or you also check out our website.
And if you're looking for other things to do, maybe you're relying on substance use as a way to distract yourself or to socialize with others. There's other things you can do to socialize, and we definitely offer that as well. And maybe you're using it for stress management. We talk about alternative ways to manage your stress, alternative ways to connect with others, to still be part of this community. And so check out some of the programs that we offer. They're all happening virtually, of course, right now, but we provide workshops on stress management. We have yoga if you want to use that as an alternative way to de-stress. We also have meditation. So check out our website, email us, let us know how we can help you. So thank you so much, Christine, for sharing all of that. Such really awesome resources, and we hope you utilize them. So that's all, folks. We hope you stay healthy
and be well
and keep tuning in. And see you next week, Tritons.